All right, with our remaining time that we have, we're going to speed through solving equations. Now, I know you guys did some equations last year, but that was last year. We've slept since then. So we're going to review this. And so when I solve equations, what I do to solve equations is I use inverse operations. Inverse operations. That means I'm going to work backwards. For example, Ashlyn, how old are you?
13.
13. Okay. So if I take my age plus Ashlyn's age together, we'd be 44 years old. So the obvious question would be, how old am I?
31.
Wait a second, you didn't add 13 and 44 together? Thank you, because I'm not that old. Yeah, you work backwards. You take away Ashlyn's age from our total of 44. By subtracting 13, you'd find out that I am 31. Okay. See how we did that? It was an addition equation, but we solved it using subtraction. We use inverse operations. That's what we're going to do today and tomorrow when we're solving these equations. So I've got these steps up here. These steps, they're what you would use to solve any multi-step equation. And we'll see some multi-steps later on this year. You'll see a lot of them next year too. Simplify each side. We're not going to do that today. What we're going to focus on today is step number 2. You know, the step that says separating the variable and constant terms by using addition and subtraction. Since our homework is titled using addition and subtraction to solve equations. Okay, we'll do step 3 tomorrow, multiply and divide. And then step 4 is a very overlooked step, the step that everybody forgets about. You can check your answers. And I don't mean by using your check answer button. Like even on your quiz, you can check your answers by plugging in. Let's look at the first example. X minus 5 equals -1. Identify your variable term. Is the variable term on the left side or the right side of the equation? It's on the left side. Okay. I kind of glazed over this. Let me go back real quick. The step that we're doing today, I know that we're going to use adding and subtracting to do it, but it's the step that says separate the variable and constant terms. What that means is that I want to get my variable term on one side of the equation and my constant terms on the other side of the equation. We call that isolating the variable, getting it by itself. I had someone in first period say, so we're quarantining it. Yes, we are quarantining the variable. We're going to get it by itself. Okay. So now that you've seen that it's an X, can you tell me what number is right next to it? Not 5. -5. -5. Yet we have to see that as a -5. What is the opposite of a -5? +5. So we're going to put +5 on both sides. There, we're using inverse operations because the inverse is the opposite of, right? So that -5 and that +5 are going to cancel out. That gives me my X quarantined by itself, if you will. On the right side of the equation, since I added 5 to the left, I have to do it to the right side. What's -1 and +5 going to give you? You're going to join those or go to war? Go to war. Who wins the war? Positives by how many? There's your answer. And that's tonight's homework. We can actually solve. By the way, your answer isn't 4. Your answer is X equals 4. Make sure you include the variable as part of your answer. So in your work papers tonight, I need 3 things. I need you to write down the equation. Yes, I know. You don't have to do that here because they're already on your paper, on your notes. I need you to write down the equation. Number 2, I need you to show me what you're doing to both sides of it. That's your work. Number 3, I need your answer. So that means you probably need 3 lines of paper for each problem. Okay, unless you can squeeze the show your step or show your work step into like in between 2 lines. Depends on how tiny you write. Now, I'm not going to make you check your answers on your work paper, but when you take Friday's quiz, you might like this step. Checking your answer means rewriting the equation with that answer you have for X plugged in for it. So I'm going to rewrite the top equation with 4 being inserted for X. 4 minus 5 equals -1. I'm going to see if that's true or not. Well, 4 minus 5 is the same as 4 plus -5. And what's 4 plus -5? It's -1. So what's that mean? My answer is -1. No, my answer is -4, or my answer is +4. This just means that when I plug in +4, that it's right. So when I plug in my answer, I should get the same thing on both sides of the equation. Otherwise, I'm wrong. Then I got to start over. I got to figure out what I did wrong. Okay, this is going to tell me that I'm right, and it's going to tell me that x = 4 is the right answer. Let's go on to the next one. Locate your variable term. Locate the constant term right next to it. What's that constant term? 8. I got to get rid of it. What's the opposite of a +8? -8. Now, the reason I want you to think of it as a -8 instead of just saying -8 is because if I think of it as a -8, when I go over to the right side of the equation, if I think of it as a -8, then I'm combining with the -2, I can use my integer operations. Is this a join forces or go to war? Join forces. What do you get when you join -2 and -8? -10. Yep. So even though it is -8, think of it as a -8. Then you can check your answer by simply plugging in -10 for P and rewriting that top equation. If you do it right, you're going to get -2. Well, -10 + 8, go to war, negatives win by 2. This tells us not that the answer is -2, it just tells us we're right. It tells us the answer of plugging in -10 was correct. Now, although a lot of your questions are going to be integer problems, there will be a couple fraction and a couple decimal problems on tonight's homework. Locate your variable term. What's the constant term that we need to get rid of? Remember, the constant terms are the numbers that don't have a variable. Ashlyn? Yes. +13.2. We need to get rid of it. If we get rid of the +13.2, W is by itself. That's what we want. What's the opposite of a +13.2? Scratch that out. It's going to be W equals. Now for the, I wouldn't say the hard part, but for the part I actually have to work out. Am I going to go to war or join forces on that? Go to war. So it means I subtract. And when you subtract, you put the smaller or larger number on top. So I'm going to have to rewrite this with a larger number on top. I'm going to subtract. I'm going to line up the decimals. Before I do that, can you tell me, does the negatives or the positives have one? Negative. So I know it's going to be negative. And let's go ahead and subtract to figure out how much the negative army wins by. I need to borrow. What's 12 minus 4? 2 minus 0? 1 minus 1? 0. So the answer is negative, because we know the negative army won this one, 2.8. Again, I need 3 things on your paper. The equation, the original equation, write it down. What you're doing to both sides, write it down. And then your answer, write it down. And if you have to do some side work, okay, do some side work. Example D. Here's one with fractions. Locate your variable term. What's the constant term that's next to it that we need to get rid of? 3/2. What's the opposite of a +3/2? -3/2. Okay, Z's by itself. Am I going to join forces or go to war? Join forces. I need a common denominator. Do I have one? Sure I do. So -1/2 plus -3/2. Join forces makes -4/2. What's -4/2 reduced to? -2/1. What's -2/1 reduced to? Just, well, -2. Yep. Yep, it just reduces to -2. They're one and the same, but one of them's better because it's reduced. Let's leave it as -2. All right, example E. Ooh, they switched the side the variable was on. So if the variable's on the right side now, tell me which number we need to get rid of. -3.4. And what's the opposite of a -3.4? +3.4. Yep. So whatever side the variable's on, it's the constant that's on that side that we need to get rid of so that we can get the variable by itself. It does no good to get the -9.3 by itself. It's already by itself. Am I going to go to war or am I going to join forces on this one? go to war. And so I'm going to write it off to the side, even though the larger number is technically already on top. I wouldn't have to do this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Do I have more negatives or more positives? I've got more negatives, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And then I have to borrow to find out how much negative it's going to be. This is going to become an 8, and that's going to become a 13. What's 13 minus 4? 8 minus 3? 5. That was 8 minus 1. Negative 5.9 equals D. Or D equals negative 5.9, or however you want to write it. I'm okay if you write it just like this. D was on the right side. It's okay to keep it on the right side. I love integer problems. The variable's on the right side. Hannah, tell me what number I need to get rid of. Sorry, what was that number? Yes. And how do I get rid of the negative 8? That's exactly right. And so that's going to cancel out, just as Hannah said, and that's going to give us Z equals, or equals Z, however I want to write it. And then Hannah, am I going to go to war or join forces on that? Going to go to war. Who wins, positives or negatives? Positives by how many? That's my answer. Z equals 5, 5 equals Z, same thing. I said we had to get through example G, didn't we? Look at that. The variable's back on the left side. Parker, can you tell me which number I need to get rid of? Yeah, what kind of 3 1/6 is that? Negative. It's a negative. And so the opposite of that is a positive 3 1/6. So P equals, and now to figure out what it equals. Parker, am I going to go to war or join forces? One's negative and one's positive. I'm going to go to war. Yeah, I'm going to go to war here, as we often seem to do. When I go to war, I have to write the larger number first. Going to war means I'm subtracting. So I'm going to subtract that. Now, do I have more positives or more negatives? More positives. I know my answer here is positive. It's just a matter of figuring out how positive it is. I have to subtract to figure out what that is. I need a common denominator. What is my common denominator going to be? It's going to be 6, which means I don't have to change the first fraction, but I do have to multiply by 3 and 3 to get 2 and 3/6. Now I'm going to leave these as mixed numbers. You can choose to use improper fractions. That's completely fine. If you leave them as mixed numbers, you are going to have to borrow. And the reason you have to borrow is because you can't do 1/6 minus 3/6. So anytime in subtraction, where you can't do that, you would borrow. Okay, we'll make that a 2. You're actually borrowing what? Usually borrow 10, right? What's your denominator out of? 6. So you need to borrow. Can you get the door for me, Maddie, please? You're borrowing 6/6. That's that 1. 6/6 is the same as 1. So if I'm borrowing 6/6, add that onto the 1 you already have, and that makes how many 6? 7/6. Do you see what I'm doing there? I'm borrowing from the 3. I'm borrowing 6/6 from the 3 to make it, and then adding it to the 1 I already have. What's 7/6 minus 3/6? 4/6. What's 2 minus 2? 0. So it's 0 and 4, or just 4/6. I know it's positive, but what's 4/6 reduced to? 2/3. So my answer is P equals 2/3. Gotta love those fractions ones, right? Fortunately, most of them are going to be integers today. Most of them are going to be integer problems. We will pick it up right there tomorrow with the story problem that we got coming up next. You guys are dismissed. 3.1 is due tomorrow. And let me know if you have any questions on either one of those assignments. Just in time, right?
Yeah.